Hi everyone, it's Wendy Trevarthen here, and welcome to this episode of Your Nurse Voice Matters, an episode that advocates, inspires, and educates our nurses globally. And I have the beautiful Helen Zahos with me today. How are you, Helen?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you.
That's good. I've been wanting to interview Helen for quite some time. She's a very busy lady, which you're about to find out about, and very certainly privileged to have some time with her today. So, Helen, I know you and your background pretty well, but can you tell our audience, why you're here as a nurse and what you've done and a little bit about you?
Right. I'm a nurse and paramedic by trade. At the moment, I'm a PhD student full time. But my background in nursing is ED, so emergency nursing, and during COVID, a little bit of ICU as well. Um, I think a few years back, I was very young, like just fresh out of my nursing, and the Bali bombings happened up in Darwin, and I was involved with all of that. And that was pretty much a step into that disaster kind of space. And from then on, with lots of experience and stuff, I did a lot of travel around Australia, working in remote areas and that sort of thing, but ended up doing a lot of volunteer work overseas. I've been to Ukraine conflict, Iraq, refugee crises, especially in Greece, and the border of Fyrom during the refugee back in 2015, earthquakes in Nepal, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. And I've done some volunteer work as well in Africa with World Youth International as well. So with nurses out in remote villages out there. So yeah, I think that's it. I feel like there's more. I don't know.
As we go on, you might remember
I
some.
remembered something, but
Yeah.
yeah, I do a lot of I like to give back and volunteering. So I guess that's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Your interest in overseas and your humanitarian work worldwide. I remember when the Bali bombings happening, I think it happened, and I was actually just come out of working in a burns unit. And that, a lot of it's funny with these, oh, well, not funny, that's the wrong word, but with these disasters comes interventions that wouldn't normally have come through research. They actually evolve and change our practices. And I remember the Bali bombings was quite instrumental in why they actually did burn grafting following that. Quite.
I think a lot of lessons came out of that, um, even the way the RAF stack patients in airplanes and things like that. Like a lot of lessons came out of that. And, unfortunately, it takes a disaster or something big for then, the National Critical Care Unit to then be formed up there, OSMAT, and all of that came out of a disaster like that. So I think we realized very quickly that Darwin was the gateway for Asia or, out to assist in terms of Australia assisting. And really around then, it was the very first time that we started sending medical teams that were civilians, like doctors, nurses, paramedics, just working in emergency departments rather than it being the army and sending them overseas to assist in these responses. So, yeah,
'Cause
interesting time to be a part of it. Yeah.
I realise that the expertise is within those units, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also, like, obviously, you've got a full suite of experiences with your international humanitarian work, voluntary work. You're developing those skills over a period of time. Has there been any one experience that really hit home to you or, made a really um, uh, great impact on the way that you practice or the way you thought about what you did as a nurse?
Oh, I think each disaster or event that I went out to volunteer for has had different impacts for different reasons. For example, like the refugee crisis, I maintain, like, yes, I've been to conflict regions and I've seen some horrendous things, but I think for me, maybe because you're watching things on TV, but when you're actually seeing it unfold in real life, I just didn't expect the things that I saw. I didn't expect in the refugee crisis. Plus, I was there a lot longer. A lot of times when you go on these little trips, and I'm not talking about MSF and Red Cross kind of 1 year stints. I'm talking about 2 weeks for a disaster is the norm, and then you kind of get pulled out because it's quite exhausting and emotionally taxing. But I was there for like 3 or 4 months, and we were receiving 5,000 refugees a day on an island. Just the stuff that, drownings were happening. I was in and out of morgues helping because I was dual, like I spoke Greek as well. So I'd be in and out of morgues helping parents identify babies that had drowned, or, like there was just really, yeah. I mean, there's shocking things like even in Africa. It doesn't have to be a war zone or something like that. But for me, I think maybe because I was there the longest, that stuck with me. And the fact that a lot of these people were fleeing from war zones and stuff like that, and just hearing their stories, yeah, that really impacted. But then again, Nepal earthquake, hearing the stories of the people there trying to handpick because they didn't have, the machinery to get to their children that had been buried or whatever, like just tragedy. Yeah. So I don't know, Wendy, I just feel like every time, everything has had some sort of impact. But I think because I was there the longest and I probably didn't have recovery in between, if that makes sense. It seemed like there was disasters happening within the disaster. Slow, masses of people, and then little disasters happening like boat accidents with 300 people or something, and that impacts your mental health too.
It does. And like you mentioned, the different waves. So you've got the initial disaster that happens, and then you recover from that for a few days. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then a week later, there might be something else as a result of the disaster that you're managing. And I'm thinking there's no water, there's no sewage. So you have secondary exposure to infections. So that introduces a whole different set of clients that are coming.
It's not very different. Oh, sorry to cut you off. It's very different when, say, it's the Typhoon Haiyan or Nepal earthquake. Typhoon Haiyan is this one big event that happens, and then there's that aftermath of like the cleanup and everything, and really traumatized people and injuries, whatever else. Nepal earthquake, we had the danger of constant aftershock, and that was kind of hairy, scary. So dealing with that, and landslides that were happening, because the aftershocks were like 8 on the Richter scale. They weren't like little tremors. They were like proper, yeah. I can't remember what we were saying now.
Right. Well, moving to the earthquake, and you're working in an earthquake prone zone, and with the aftershocks, what are some of the drills that you have? Like, it's not like you're in a hospital where you've got sirens or anything. You're actually working in countries that have, different standards of healthcare. Can you just describe to us, okay, you've landed to work in that area, what sort of orientation do they give to you about some of the contingencies that you should be aware of?
Well, that particular disaster, I was quite lucky in that the organisation I was with was Nepalese. So I met the team in Sydney and we flew into Nepal. And I noticed everyone because when you go to these disasters, the whole world's turned up and they're all in planes, and everyone's on the tarmac with different, flags flying and whatever else. But because we were Nepalese Australian, the whole team, except for me, and going into, so pretty much they handed us a couple of helicopters, a couple of buses, and they were like, off you go, because we were affiliated with the country. Whereas Australia, America, all your heavy hitters were your main, people coming in to help. Those large organizations were sitting on the tarmac because there was, when an incident happens like that, there's vulnerability in the country, and India at the time, I think, had tried to cross borders without permission, and people have good intentions, and when a country feels vulnerable, they're like, everyone just stop what you're doing until we can coordinate what's going on here. So we're really lucky. We landed there straight into the mayor's office, had kind of high-level meetings with, defense ministers, whatever else, and met with a large map, and they were like, here's a chopper, there's 2 buses, and most of us were medical, but we also had supplies to get out. So in a big disaster, yes, as a nurse, you want to get out there and help. But really the reality is helping the masses versus, so really it was about getting blankets and rice out to people. And then we followed up in buses to set up on the side of a mountain, literally in tents, and setting up a clinic there and finding those areas that were heavy hit with the most casualties. And then, it all unfolded that way. It's really, and a lot of people kind of talk about turning up to these things. You can be an independent volunteer or independent nurse, as an example, but you have to go with an organization. A lot of people think they can just turn up with their backpack or whatever and they're there, but you find yourself not being coordinated or not in the, and no one, you haven't been vetted. So no one actually knows you're a nurse or you're a paramedic or a doctor or whatever. So you're harder to coordinate. Even Ukraine, when I turned up to Ukraine, yes, there was only 3 of us, a coordinator, a doctor and myself, sorting the supplies and stuff out and organizing, having these meetings and things. But there were government agents that it took us hours to cross the border, but they knew we were coming and they actually met with us a couple of hours just over the border. And then they were getting us through all the checkpoints and, because it's serious stuff. A lot goes on behind the scenes in these disaster type areas, not just the conflicts, but there's a lot of concerns that you wouldn't think of as a nurse normally. Suddenly kids are getting kidnapped and sold on the black market, young women. The biggest concerns we had, young women being lured into sex as sex slaves and stuff. And then we saw that in Typhoon Haiyan. Like the biggest concern was that they were going around, there was some crooks going around with loudspeakers collecting, saying that we've got some orphans that we've found from the typhoon. We need some young girls to come in. We'll house them. They can come and look after these kids, orphans. We'll house and feed them. And these girls just, thinking that they were going to be housed and fed and looked after, were taken away and onto the black market. So just things that you just wouldn't even, because you and I are decent people, right? We wouldn't think like that. So what I'm trying to get at is the chaos that goes on. There's so many layers.
Yes, so many different angles of things that you need to be aware of. Gosh, have your wits about you. Now, I do remember seeing, and I think you talked about this at a seminar for BPW a little while ago about your work in Africa and setting up. Like, are you a midwife, or did you look after? You looked after a mum. Would you mind sharing with us that story? Because that was really quite touching. I do remember, like, she came back afterwards where you helped her through labour.
Oh, I did. And that was a beautiful story. So there's a little baby in Africa now called Helen, and she's named after me.
Right.
I'm not a midwife. I've fought a few babies in my time and supported mums, but definitely not a midwife. But in Africa, it's the amount of women that are birthing at the same time is just incredible. Like you walk into these, into the maternity ward, and it's just everyone's just on beds birthing at once with no one supporting them. Like it's really, but being able to help that woman, it was just really touching, I think, because she was on her own. She had nobody. Very different there's no sheets on the bed. There's no, I just remember after she gave birth, the midwife from Africa came in, like the local midwife, and we just stood her in a plastic tub with a cup, with some water just to splash on herself. She got changed. This is moments later. They've literally just finished, sewing her up and handed, she put a change of clothes on, and she grabbed that baby and literally walked out the door to go get dinner ready for her family. And it was just, I couldn't believe it. But she was just so, I think we just shared a few moments there because I was just in awe of her. I thought you're amazing. But the differences, because when my sister gave birth here, well, she had a C-section, but in a private hospital, right? Very different. At the level of, and it's not just the care, but the opportunities and what we have here versus, no sheets, even the cotton balls, the way they do things, they share a needle, like they draw stuff they have one needle sitting, to draw out of the medications and stuff. And again, it's just different. It's not best practice for us, but that's all they've got to work with, But she was beautiful, and they've reached out a few times and kept in contact. But the little one's called Helen now. They're those little beautiful moments. I don't know. This is why we do it, Yeah.
So with what agencies do you go through? So I know a lot of people, I talk to a lot of nurses and they are interested in this. So can you run through from your knowledge, the different agencies that are available, people are interested in doing such work?
Absolutely. Look, you do have your bigger organizations like your MSFs and Red Cross, but they generally want you for a lot longer. They want you for a year stint and something like that. But when you've got a mortgage like I do, I couldn't afford because it's expensive. Volunteering, it's not cheap. You need to pay for your airfares. You need to pay for, the time that you're away, all the rest of it. With Africa, I was with World Youth International. So I did a couple of stints. I was their ambassador there for a few years. So really great group. And, if you want to go somewhere where it's quite organized and safe and yeah, that's something. It's more of a nice trip away, that meaningful. You get to do a little bit of, the nursing work and stuff and get a taste of that sort of thing. So, um, smaller organizations generally, like I know ADRA is a big organization, but one of their sister companies, Adventist Health, I think they're called, is who I went to Iraq with. And later to Ukraine. I'm not Adventist, but a lot of those faith-based organizations do have the funds, and they actually get into areas that some of the bigger organizations kind of might be out on the border in Poland, but we were actually in the red zone. So there's a number of organizations out there. You definitely want to be affiliated with someone because if you need to get out in a hurry, yeah, it's not. Medical rescue is who we went to Typhoon Haiyan with, but I don't think they no longer do disaster stuff. But I do remember that they had gone to Christchurch, and I remember looking at their website and signing up. So that, the point is, sign up now if you want to do something like that. OSMAT's the way to go if you really want disaster stuff. OSMAT, there's MIMS courses and things like that. And once you've done those and you're affiliated, if something comes up and you've got the training behind you, you can then go off, with them. You get released from your local, wherever you're working. One other organisations, Doctors of the World, so MSF's sister company is who I was with, Medicine du Monde in Greece. And that's who I was. Yeah, I've done a few stints with them actually. And it helps in Greece because I speak Greek as well. But I tried to, I wanted to do MSF there, but MSF were like, no, even if you come to Greece, we'll send you to, what was the country now? Not Afghanistan. It was not Syria, one of those countries around there. And I was just like, but for a whole year, again, it was that. So it doesn't matter where you kind of join, those bigger organizations want you for a lot longer. There's a lot of smaller ones. Emergency was another one that wanted me in Afghanistan for a while. They're an Italian group. So there's lots of groups out there. It's just a matter of jumping online, making sure that it sounds, you don't want to be, some of them are cowboy type, they don't really care about your safety. You've got to kind of vet for yourself and just see. But yeah. And also be cautious because when it comes to money, especially in the humanitarian space, kind of look at the organization, where money's going, how they fund things, if you're fundraising for them, where that money goes, all that sort of stuff. Because the humanitarian space is a very big money churner. Yeah.
And any nurses that are perhaps, they're just at the moment working on the medical floor or a surgical unit, what sort of credentials or experience should they be targeting as a stepstone to doing this kind of work?
Well, again, if it's the disaster stuff, you want to go and do the MIMS because that's very, through the World Health Organization, that's the best practice kind of standard training. However, I think when people think of disasters and things, they go, oh my gosh, they think of the big traumas and things and all of that. But actually, the Nepal earthquake, the girl that were from the nursing home that were really great with wounds were the best for us because I was like, I wouldn't know as an emergency nurse, I'm great with all the trauma stuff. But I was looking at these, manky looking wounds that were how many days old going, oh, what do we put on that? And how do we dress that? So really, if you're on a medical ward or like all that general knowledge is handy. And even in Africa, basic even obs or again, dressings, these things that, at home you take for granted because you've got beautiful, you're unpacking things in a sterile field or whatever. You don't have that opportunity. It's very different. But you come across some very interesting cases scenarios where you think, oh gosh, I didn't think that disease even existed, let alone still rife in certain areas. So even the learning, honestly, I know you're talking about what courses to do and things like that, but don't be scared. Even if you're, with your medical, surgical, whatever else, I say this to people, everyone brings something to the team. And I think it's great if someone's come from medical or surgical, we're all from different areas because you all have some sort of knowledge that you're bringing to the team. And that is just wonderful. If you have 10 emergency nurses and then, does that make sense? So
A bit limited. You'd like
I
to see
think
cross-reference,
if
yeah.
you're sitting there now listening to this going, oh, I wouldn't mind going and volunteering or doing something overseas, don't let your skill, wherever you're at, whatever your specialty might be, hold you back. Because even if you're on a mental health net, that's handy. We need those people too. And there are online courses. There's, I think it's Disaster Ready and Prevention Web. There's a few things online that are free that you can access, that are little courses you can do. What do you do if you're held hostage? What do you do if you're, those kind of little courses you can do to prevent or going to these places. More often than not, the organisation, if they're good, will give you some sort of education before you head out and prepare you. But again, every organisation is different and there's no real standards out there. So, yeah, just be cautious and ask lots of questions.
And it's not just the clinical skill of it or the area of looking after. It's also like the communication, how you can actually read the room or read the situation, talk to families, all those. Yes.
All
of
life
those things.
experience.
Yes.
Life experience. And I think the older you are as well, and that emotional intelligence and recognizing, because you may not understand the language, but reading body language and reading on, and hang on, there's tensions here, or this, we're not safe, or just recognizing when you're not welcome and not pushing, The thing to remember as well, going into these countries, especially even Africa, they have well-trained nurses over there. They just don't have the infrastructure or like the consumables. They may not have copious amounts of whatever, dressings and things like that. That doesn't mean they're bad at their job. They just do it differently. And sometimes it's hard because we come in with the best of intentions, like, we're here to help. And it's almost like, well, we know better than you because we're, and you've got to be so cautious. Even in conflict regions, going in Ukraine, Iraq, very like going in with that, we're just here to help you. You tell us what you want us to do, not coming in like we're going to take over because we're better and we're here to, and really giving that agency and that respect to the country that is receiving us and just there to support them. It's a big one because you don't want to, they are trained in their own right. We just do things differently. It doesn't mean it's wrong, it's just the best that they can do with what they've got. So, yeah.
So I know that you've got a few things you're talking just before we started about. You've got some conference yet to be confirmed coming up, but you do a lot of speaking in conferences and things.
Yeah.
What are the next steps for Helen? Like, have you got any overseas planned or in the pipeline?
At the moment, I'm doing my PhD, and I think it's really hard to be away from patients and the emergency department and ICU and all of that sort of stuff. Today I was speaking with WADM, so the World Association of Disaster Association. They've got a conference in Paris next year, which I want to be able to speak about some of the research that I've done with the work that I'm doing now. I'm focusing on, the mental health outcomes for disaster medical teams, so doctors, nurses, paramedics returning from deployments, funnily enough. There's a couple of conferences, and as a PhD candidate, I have to present at some of those. Honestly, that's it for me, just focusing on the PhD and knowing that but this is now and lots of years later, it's taking me to get to this point, knowing that I don't need to be on the front line and getting my hands dirty to be able to make a difference or have an impact. So through policy or through the research that I'm doing, improving things so that people don't have to go through the hardships or the bad things that I went through necessarily. And I can leave, that'll be my legacy, leaving the place a little bit better for younger nurses coming through and don't have to have the same kind of struggles, And so I'm still kind of caring, but in a different way. And yeah, it's just, I'm 49 now, going on 50. Yeah, springtime to, yeah.
Yeah. Evidently, like I've taken to writing my experiences in books and sharing on this
Sharing.
podcast. So it sort of turns into a different phase. All right. So we've got a young student out there and they're just coming into third year and they're going into like emergency department. Lucky them. They've obviously done really well. They did their interview very well and been offered a place in emergency. And like I think you're going to repeat what you just said, but if there's anything else that you're wanting to add, what advice would you give to this young nurse, to them if they're actually interested in doing this humanitarian overseas work?
Yeah, I think, um, well, it's not even to do with the volunteer work I think be kind. And I've written that down in bold, capitals on this bit of paper in front of me. And I think, there is a culture out there, especially amongst nurses, that we are our worst enemy at times, so just being kind to each other, but also if you do go overseas and volunteer, be kind to, like I said earlier, they might be doing things differently, but it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Mm.
So, and being kind to them, because we can often, think we might be a little bit better or we do things better or far more superior, but we've got access to that sort of thing. So being kind to each other as nurses, kind to the people that we go and treat. I think there's a bit of a gap at the moment. We're forgetting why we're doing this and what's the purpose, and sometimes we forget it's the patient. Some of the conversations that I have, we're often too busy on our phones or worrying about what's happening on social media while we could be offering, I don't know, a blanket or having a conversation to the old lady on the stretcher over there. Remember why we're here. And it's not all glamour and all that sort of stuff. We've got to remember, yeah.
Those little things matter, and they build connections, and it's the non-verbal things that connect people as well. So,
Wendy, the amount of knowledge you can get sort of offering someone a cup of tea or tucking them in with a blanket and having a conversation, and then suddenly you're like, oh, and then the doctor goes, how did you know about all that history? And it's like, well, I had a conversation and we chatted, and that's how it's an important part still. And I think we are so busy that we're behind our little computers now typing stuff in and clicking stuff on so it looks good on our computer, but we actually forget what's in front of us and it's the patient, Yeah.
Mm. It's called reading the room, isn't it? Like you walk
Yeah.
into a room and over time you learn that it's not the noisiest, loudest, most technical person that you need to pay attention to. The quiet one in the corner you want to find out more about, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Helen. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy PhD time at the moment. I've done postgraduate studies. So I'm imagining it's just that next level up, to be able to do a very in-depth to be able to do that. And how long have you got to know? Like, is this your first year?
No, I'm into my second year now. I've passed my candidature. I've got mid-can coming up in August. So I'm kind of halfway through and I'm actually really enjoying it. I hated research when I first started nursing. I was like, what is this? But now, like nearly 30 years on, now I see why and I understand the importance of it and I'm actually really enjoying it. But it's taken a long time to get in. It wasn't just a natural, a passion or love thing. Yeah.
I would imagine that you've got quality happening there with the things that are the tasks or the research that you're doing. So
Yeah.
and life experience, like you've been out there and been doing so much that you can pull on that, and then we just need to, exciting journey for you. I'm very excited.
Thank you. Feel free, guys, to reach out on socials or anything if you're watching this. Any questions or anything. I'm normally pretty receptive. I am busy, as Wendy knows. It might be short and sharp, but I will get back to you. I feel like I could have said so much more.
Well, look, there may be another opportunity. We'd love to have you back on, toward the end of your PhD and see how, what's evolved since then. And, you deliver those conference speeches overseas.
The other day, Wendy, you just don't know where your nursing takes you. And I was invited to, like, I attended a conference, and maybe that's another message too. You're nursing, make sure you do these professional things of like going to conferences, networking. You just don't know where that'll take you, because suddenly I'm standing there, tap on the shoulder, Helen, can you come over and be part of a select group to speak with Prince Harry about your research and this, that, the other. And I was like, okay. So, you just, I mean, that's just a small, example, but yeah, get out there, attend those conferences, and just be kind, be good nurses, do the best you can. Yeah.
Okay, everyone. You've been listening to Your Nurse Voice Matters, and been listening to Helen telling her experience with her nursing over the years. We look forward to seeing you, hearing you on the next episode of Your Nurse Voice Matters. And if you know a nurse that's got a story to tell, I'd love to hear from you. See you then.
Bye.